Welcome back. Yesterday, you looked at the map. You saw the mountains that act as a crown, the oceans that wash the feet of the peninsula, and the vast plains that hold the belly of the nation. You found your state, your home. Today, we stop looking at space and start looking at time. You asked for a deep dive, a marathon of the mind. To understand India, we cannot just wade in the shallows, we must swim the whole river. The history of India is not a straight line. It is a braid, weaving together geography, religion, invasion, and synthesis. Settle in. This is Day 2, The River of Time, the Story of India. Part 1. The Dawn, the First Cities. The Mystery of the Brick. Imagine you are a British engineer in the 1850s, laying railway tracks near the Indus River, modern-day Pakistan. You need ballast stones to stabilize the tracks. The locals point you toward a mound of old dirt. You dig, and you find bricks. Millions of them. They are burnt, hard, and perfectly standardized. You use them to build 100 miles of railway, unknowingly destroying the ruins of one of the oldest civilizations on earth, Harappa. This is how the story begins, with a mystery. Around 4,500 years ago, while the Egyptians were building pyramids and the Mesopotamians were writing on clay tablets, the Indus Valley Civilization, IVC, was thriving. But unlike the others, this civilization was silent. We have found their seals with script on them, but to this day, no one can read them. So we must read the stones. If you walk through the city of Mohenjo-daro in 2500 BCE, you would be shocked by its modernity. The streets were laid out in a perfect grid system, like Manhattan. Every house had access to a covered drainage system, engineering that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for thousands of years. But here is the most fascinating story of the IVC, the case of the missing weapons. In almost all ancient civilizations, we find piles of swords, armor, and murals of kings smiting their enemies. In the Indus Valley, almost nothing. We found toys, jewelry, scales for weighing goods, and a great bath, a public pool, but very few weapons of war and no grand palaces for a single dictator. The story. It appears to have been a society built on trade and commerce, perhaps ruled by a council of merchants rather than a warlord. It was a utilitarian utopia that flourished for 1,000 years and then mysteriously vanished. Was it a drought? A flood? A shift in the river's course? The cities emptied, the script was lost, and the bricks were buried, waiting for the railway engineers. Part 2. The Forest Philosophers, the Vedic Age. The people of the horse. As the cities of the Indus fell silent, a new sound began to echo across the Gangetic plains, the chanting of hymns and the thundering of hooves. A group of people whom we call the Aryans, a linguistic term meaning noble, began to migrate into the subcontinent. They brought with them two things that would change India forever: the horse and Sanskrit. They were pastoralists, herders of cattle. To them, the cow was currency, wealth, and life. They didn't build brick cities, they lived in temporary structures. But they built something more lasting than bricks: the Vedas. The story. Imagine a group of sages sitting around a fire in a clearing in the forest. They are not writing, they are reciting. They believe that sound is sacred. If you mispronounce a syllable, the cosmic order is disturbed. For centuries, these massive texts, hymns to the sun, the fire, Agni, and the rain, Indra, were never written down. They were memorized father to son, teacher to student in a perfect telephone game that lasted 1,000 years. This oral tradition created the foundation of Hinduism. Slowly, these wanderers settled. They cleared the thick forests of the Ganges using iron tools. The Janapadas, footholds of the people, became Mahajanapadas, great kingdoms. The tribal chieftain became a king. The simple society stratified into the caste system, Varna, originally a division of labor that rigidified into a hierarchy of birth. Part 3. The Great Awakening, the Age of Descent. The prince who walked away. By 600 BCE, the simplistic nature worship of the Vedas had become complex. Rituals were expensive, animal sacrifices were bloody, the caste system was oppressive. People were asking, is this all there is? What happens after death? Why do we suffer? In the foothills of the Himalayas, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama had everything: youth, wealth, and a palace shielded from pain. One day, he stepped out and saw four things: an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and an ascetic. The illusion of his perfect life shattered. The story. He did what no one expected. He left his wife and newborn son in the middle of the night, traded his silk robes for rags, and walked into the forest. He starved himself, meditated, and sought answers. Finally, under a Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, he woke up. He became the Buddha, the awakened one. His message was radical: You don't need priests. You don't need rituals. You don't need caste. Desire is the cause of suffering. Let go of desire and you will be free. At the same time, another teacher, Mahavira, was preaching Jainism, emphasizing extreme non-violence, ahimsa, not even hurting an insect. India was now a land of intellectual ferment. It was the age of the Upanishads, where kings sat at the feet of hermits to ask, "Who am I?" Part 4. The First Empire, the Mauryas. The boy and the mastermind. While India was philosophizing, the world was conquering. Alexander the Great smashed into the northwest borders of India in 326 BCE. He didn't stay long, but he left a power vacuum. Enter Chanakya, also known as Kautilya. He was a teacher at the great university of Taxila. He was ugly, toothless, and absolutely brilliant. He was insulted by the king of the Nanda dynasty in the east. Chanakya untied his topknot and swore he wouldn't tie it back until the Nanda dynasty was destroyed. He found a young boy playing a game of kings in a village. This boy was Chandragupta Maurya. The story, it is the ultimate underdog story. Chanakya trained Chandragupta in warfare and statecraft. Together, they gathered a ragtag army and toppled the mighty Nanda Empire. Chandragupta became the first emperor to unite most of India. But the greatest story of this dynasty belongs to his grandson Ashoka. The transformation of Ashoka. Ashoka was a brutal warrior. He killed his brothers to get the throne. He marched on Kalinga, modern-day Odisha, to conquer it. The battle was a slaughter. 100,000 died. The river Daya ran red with blood. Ashoka walked the battlefield, expecting to feel triumph. Instead, he saw a woman crying over her dead husband. He saw the carnage. Something broke inside him. He famously declared, "What have I done?" He converted to Buddhism. He gave up conquest by the sword, Digvijay, for conquest by righteousness, Dharma Vijay. He carved his apologies and his laws onto rocks and pillars across India. He established hospitals for humans and animals. He sent his children to Sri Lanka to spread peace. The lion capital of Ashoka, 4 lions standing back to back, is the national emblem of India today. It reminds us that the greatest strength is the strength to change one's mind. Part 5. The Golden Age, the Guptas and the South. The mathematicians and the poets. Fast forward a few centuries. Empires rose and fell, but around 300 CE, the Gupta Empire emerged. We call this the Golden Age. Why? Not because of conquests, but because of the mind. The story: while Europe was entering the Dark Ages, India was calculating the circumference of the earth. Aryabhata looked at the stars and realized the earth rotates on its axis. He worked with the concept of zero and decimals. Without this Indian invention, modern computers wouldn't exist. Kalidasa, the Shakespeare of India, wrote plays like Shakuntala that are masterpieces of human emotion. Metallurgy peaked. The iron pillar of Delhi, built during this time, has stood in the open rain for 1,600 years and has not rusted. Modern science is still baffled by the purity of the iron. The lords of the ocean, the Cholas. We often forget the south. While the north was dealing with land armies, the south was looking at the ocean. The Chola dynasty, peak around 1000 CE, was a thalassocracy, a maritime empire. The story: Raja Chola and his son Rajendra Chola built the most powerful navy of the time. They didn't just trade, they influenced. They sailed to Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Malaysia and Indonesia. They built the Brihadiswarar temple in Thanjavur, a granite structure so massive that the shadow of the main tower never falls on the ground at noon. It was built without binding cement, just interlocking stones. Part 6. The Sword and the Rose, the Medieval Era. The arrival of Islam. Geography is destiny. The Khyber Pass in the northwest is the open door. Through this door came the Turks, the Afghans and the Persians. Mahmud of Ghazni raided. Muhammad Ghori conquered. By the 12th century, the Delhi Sultanate was established. This was a collision of two distinct civilizations. Hinduism was flexible, iconic and hierarchical. Islam was strict, iconoclastic, anti-idol and egalitarian. The clash was violent, but it also birthed a new culture. The story: a new language formed in the army camps, Urdu, meaning camp. A new music emerged, Qawwali. A new architecture rose, the dome met the lotus. The Mughals. In 1526, a prince named Babur came down from Central Asia. He claimed to be a descendant of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane. He used a new technology, cannons, to win the Battle of Panipat. The Mughal Empire began. The Mughals gave India its most romanticized history. 1. Akbar the Great. He realized he couldn't rule a Hindu majority by force. He married Rajput princesses, abolished the religious tax, jizya, and created a new religion, Din-e-Ilahi, blending all faiths. He was illiterate but possessed a library of 24,000 books read to him daily. 2. Shah Jahan, the builder. He gave us the Red Fort and the Jama Masjid. But his grief gave us the Taj Mahal. When his wife Mumtaz died, he poured the treasury into building a marble mausoleum that changes color with the sun. It was a monument to love, but it bankrupted the state. 3. Aurangzeb, the strict son. He imprisoned his father Shah Jahan, who spent his last days staring at the Taj Mahal through a window, and seized the throne. He was pious but intolerant. He expanded the empire to its greatest size, but cracked its foundation by alienating the populace. When Aurangzeb died in 1707, the empire was like a hollow tree, huge, but ready to collapse. Part 7. The merchant Who became king, the British. The company. This is perhaps the strangest story in human history. India was not conquered by a country. It was conquered by a corporation. The East India Company, EIC, came to trade spices. They asked the Mughal Emperor Jahangir for a permit. He agreed, thinking they were harmless petty traders. The story, the EIC realized that India was fractured. Princes were fighting princes. The British had better guns and, more importantly, better discipline. They played the game of divide and rule. At the Battle of Plassey, 1757, Robert Clive bribed the enemy general. The battle was a sham. The EIC won Bengal, the richest province. They stopped bringing gold to buy spices. Instead, they taxed the Indians and used that money to buy Indian goods to sell in Europe. It was the perfect looting machine. 1857, the fire. Resentment built up. Farmers were starving, soldiers, sepoys were disrespected, and kings were losing their crowns. A rumor spread that the new rifle cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat, offending both Hindus and Muslims. Mangal Pandey fired the first shot. The revolt of 1857 exploded. For a few months, the British were terrified. But the revolt lacked unified leadership. The British crushed it with brutal force. The company was dissolved. Queen Victoria took over. India was now the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. Part 8. The Walk to Freedom. The lawyer from South Africa. The early 20th century saw violent revolutionaries, Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Subhash Chandra Bose, who built an army to fight the British. They were brave and they are heroes. But the man who delivered the final blow didn't use a gun. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned from South Africa in 1915. He looked at India and realized the British ruled because Indians led them. The story: Gandhi stripped down to a loincloth to identify with the poorest peasant. He introduced Satyagraha, truth force. They tax our salt? We will walk to the ocean and pick up a handful of salt. The Dandi March. They beat us? We will not hit back. We will fill the jails until they burst. It was a psychological war. He shamed the British. How can you claim to be civilized when you are beating unarmed people? The trauma of partition. World War II broke the British Empire's back. They decided to leave. But the joy of independence was poisoned by the tragedy of division. Religious tensions, stoked by politicians and colonial policy, ripped the country apart. Lines were drawn on a map by a British lawyer, Cyril Radcliffe, who had never visited India before. August 15, 1947. India awoke to freedom. But Pakistan was born. The migration was the largest in history. 14 million people moved. 1 million died in the riots. The train tracks that the British built were now carrying trains full of corpses. Conclusion: the PALIMPSEST. Look at your map again, the teacher says. India is a palimpsest. A palimpsest is a manuscript on which the original writing has been erased to make room for later writing but of which traces remain. Look at the map. That city name? It might be from the Vedas. That railway line? Built by the British to transport troops, now carrying millions of families to weddings. That spicy biryani you eat? A Persian recipe adapted with Indian spices. That cricket match on TV? An English game played with Indian passion. History in India is not in the past. It is on the street. It is in the way people greet each other. It is in the architecture. The expert was once a beginner. Today you are no longer a beginner. You have swum the river. You have seen the bricks of Harappa, the fire of the Vedas, the peace of Ashoka, the Taj of the Mughals, and the spinning wheel of Gandhi. This was the story of how we got here. Day 3 will be about the people. We will stop looking at kings and start looking at the culture, the languages, the festivals, the food, and the beautiful chaos of a billion people living together. Rest now. You have traveled 5,000 years today. Here are 10 questions and answers based on our Day 2, the Story of India journey, perfect for a community post or a quick revision video. Day 2, the River of Time quiz. Q1. Which ancient civilization's ruins were unknowingly used by British engineers to build a railway line in the 1850s? Answer. The Indus Valley Civilization, specifically the bricks from Harappa. Q2. Unlike other ancient civilizations, what was surprisingly missing from the excavations of the Indus Valley cities? Answer. Large stockpiles of weapons and grand palaces for warrior kings, suggesting a peace-loving or trade-based society. Q3. How were the Vedas preserved for thousands of years before they were finally written down? Answer. Through a strict oral tradition, memorization from father to son, where sound was considered sacred. Q4. What 4 sights made Prince Siddhartha Gautama leave his palace and eventually become the Buddha? Answer. An old man, a sick man, a corpse, and an ascetic, holy man. Q5. Who was the master strategist that guided Chandragupta Maurya to defeat the Nanda dynasty and establish the first great empire? Answer. Chanakya, also known as Kautilya. Q6. Which battle caused Emperor Ashoka to give up conquest by the sword, Digvijay, and adopt conquest by righteousness, Dharmavijay? Answer. The Battle of Kalinga. Q7. During the Gupta Golden Age, which Indian mathematician calculated that the earth rotates on its axis and worked with the concept of zero? Answer. Aryabhata. Q8. Which South Indian dynasty is famous for building a massive navy and influencing Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia? Answer. The Chola Dynasty. Q9. What was the immediate military trigger for the Revolt of 1857? Answer. The introduction of new rifle cartridges rumored to be greased with cow and pig fat. Q10. What was the name of the psychological weapon Gandhi used to fight the British, which focused on truth and non-violence? Answer. Satyagraha. Support the channel. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please subscribe to Evaluate My Knowledge, like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss Day 3. Special question for you. Write your answer in the comments below. Closing parenthesis. If you could travel back in time to any one era of Indian history we discussed today, from the mysterious Harappa to the golden age of Guptas, which one would you choose and why? The best answers will be pinned in the comments section.